Welcome to Holistic Health for Happy Kids, the podcast where we dive into the root causes of children's health challenges and explore natural solutions to help little ones thrive. I'm Lisa, a passionate paediatric naturopath and mum of 3, dedicated to empowering parents with practical tips and expert insights to raise healthy, happy kids. Each episode will unpack common childhood health concerns like allergies, eczema, fussy eating, and gut health, and share evidence-based advice to support your child's wellness naturally. Let's create a generation of thriving children, one holistic step at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. So today we're welcoming to the podcast Amy, who is one of the naturopaths and nutritionists at the Paediatric Naturopath. And Amy is an absolute whiz with hair tissue mineral analysis. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So thanks for coming on the podcast, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I'd love to know a little bit about your journey and how you ended up being a nutritionist and a naturopath.
Yeah, so I guess it's based on a personal experience. So I started seeing an integrative GP when I was about the age of 18, and she used natural therapies and lots of herbs to correct some hormone imbalances. And it just made me really interested in naturopathy and food as medicine. And that's what put me down the path to start studying.
And you've got a degree in both, so 2 separate degrees in nutrition and naturopathy. So how long did it take you to do all of that? This is a bit of an undertaking.
I actually did a double degree in 5 years. So I was doing 9 units a semester and did summer and winter school for 5 years. Yeah, gosh. Back to back.
It's great to have a really deep understanding of both, because then depending on the client, you might choose herbs, you might choose compounds, you might choose food.
Yep.
But the thing that you are best known for is hair tissue mineral analysis, and you are, I would say, one of the leading experts in Australia when it comes to hair tissue mineral analysis. So why or how did you get so into this and become such an expert?
Great question. I love hair tissue mineral analysis because it's non-invasive. So, and it's really good for kids. You know, it's just a little hair sample. So the information that we can get from one tiny little hair sample is just phenomenal. The reason I use it a lot is because it takes out all the guesswork. So a lot of the unknowns, or it could be this, it could be that. All those answers are, answered for us with the test results.
And the thing, I love all those things, but I also love that it's actually very affordable compared to a lot of the other testing that is useful.
Yeah.
Hair tissue mineral analysis is very affordable.
Yeah.
And so what would be your typical client? Like, who comes to see you and what are their concerns?
Yep. So I seem to attract a lot of little boys between the age of 3 and 7. And whether or not they have some form of diagnosis, so ADHD, ASD, OCD, behavioural concerns, they're the type of kids that I see. So a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
And the good thing is, because you do have the actual degree in nutrition, people can very often use their NDIS funding to see you as long as they have funding in the correct category. So that's obviously a big advantage.
Yep.
And who should do a HTMA, so a hair tissue mineral analysis? Who should be looking at doing that?
Everyone. I think, like I said, it just takes all the guesswork out. A lot of the time, nutrients can behave like heavy metals. So when there are elevations in our nutrients, when they're in excess, they can come across with signs and symptoms of toxicity. And so getting hair analysis results gives us those answers. Is it heavy metals? Is it toxic elements?
And so which of those nutritional elements would cause the issues that you're talking about?
Elevations in either calcium and magnesium. I see a lot of elevated copper in a lot of my kids' hair analysis. elevated iron, and obviously elevated toxic elements, so your heavy metals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know of iron as being a really good thing. So what's the problem with having high iron?
It can be an indication of oxidative stress in the body. So a lot of the time I do see children that come in and they have had some blood tests maybe done with the pediatrician or a GP, and it comes back that they've got low iron. And most of the time they have been on long-term supplementation of iron and their levels have never come up. So straight away, I start questioning what's blocking this iron from being absorbed. 9 out of 10 times, it's some form of, like I said, the toxicity. So either elevated nutritional elements or heavy metals, they can block iron. So when we see elevated iron on a hair tissue mineral analysis, that's the stored iron. So we're more looking at your ferritin, which is really susceptible to oxidation. So things like copper, when that's in excess, can actually like rust iron in the body. And that is 9 out of 10 times we eliminate whatever the toxic elements are, and naturally the iron will rise, blood iron will rise.
I think the level of understanding of iron in the medical community is pretty poor. And very often the kids that I see will be on a very popular liquid iron supplement, and they might have been on it for years and nothing has changed. So the next advice they get is to double the amount that they take, which is, it's not working. So why would you just double it and hope for the best? There's so much more intricacies to iron deficiencies that really you need to speak to a nutritionist or a naturopath to understand. And oxidative stress, I've been doing a lot of research on that recently because I'm very interested in congenital heart disease because of my own children's issues. And if you've got congenital heart disease, you've got very high oxidative stress. So by addressing that, you can actually eliminate so many of those comorbidities that come along with having a serious health illness like congenital heart disease.
Yep.
So what do you think? I guess it's very much trending right now. The sprays that people are doing for heavy metals, people are just doing sprays. What's your opinion on those?
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't know what's going on. So again, I do see a lot of children whose parents have bought these sprays and drops online. Not a fan, one, because there's no research to support its safe use, especially with children. And number two, you don't know what you're dealing with. So are there even heavy metals there? So test. And it's very much a balancing, like biochemistry game, where if you've got elevated arsenic, that's going to require different treatment to elevated aluminium, for example. So there is no quick fix. It's more about giving the individual, their body, what it needs to be able to mobilize these heavy metals. So we don't detox anyone, children or adults, and it is literally as simple as giving their body those key nutrients that they require to mobilize the heavy metals from the tissues.
Yeah. And of course, you've done the Walsh training.
Yep.
Which I believe has only opened up to non-medical people recently.
Yep.
So you're probably one of the first naturopaths in Australia to do the Walsh training. Would that be right?
Yep. So first naturopath worldwide, actually.
Oh.
So for 7 years, I've been applying to study with Bill Walsh at the Walsh Research Institute, and they've knocked me back every year until this year. And
so what is the Walsh training for those of us who are not that familiar with it?
Yeah, so I would say Bill Walsh is at the forefront as far as balancing brain chemistry goes. So without getting too biochemical again, a lot of signs and symptoms that we see in clinic, like anxiety, sleep disorders, behavioural concerns, the underlying cause to those presenting symptoms is an imbalance in neurotransmitters, which are our brain hormones. And so balancing out the nutrients that are required to make these neurotransmitters is how we get phenomenal results with children and adults. Mental health, yeah.
Pretty in depth, and again, just not I don't think there's a level of understanding in Australia, certainly, about some of these neurotransmitters and how we can actually address a lot of issues.
Yep.
And so the heavy metals, which heavy metals do you see the most, or generally what heavy metals are you seeing?
Yeah. So every case, I would say, is very different. And the types of things that I see are not so much where the child is being exposed to a continual heavy metal on a daily basis, but rather small amounts that have either been acquired over time by not having those nutrients that I was talking about that help mobilize the heavy metals. But the patterns that I do see are more heavy metals that have been inherited. So yeah, heavy metals and toxic elements all cross the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, they cross the placental barrier. So the easiest way, unfortunately, for a mum to chelate her toxic elements is to have a baby.
It's so interesting. I will often, whenever I do a child's HTMA and there's a lot going on, I'll try and do the mum and the dad together.
Yep.
And it's so interesting. The thing that actually blows my mind most is that the dad's pattern of heavy metals will also show up in the child.
Yep.
Even though he only contributed one sperm to the whole process, like he wasn't feeding the baby like through the placenta for 9 months. Tell me about that and how that happens.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, like I said, with the heavy metals, they accumulate over time. So dad may have been exposed to something maybe on a daily basis through work, and those key nutrients that are missing to help his body mobilize those heavy metals, like zinc. Zinc would probably be one of the number one nutrients that is required for certain heavy metals. So if dad, unfortunately did no preconception care and his zinc levels were low, then the heavy metals would have been passed through his sperm. Yeah. And you've got to remember that it's not just the sperm, it's the nutrients that are obviously in the semen.
Okay.
Yeah, that is passed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what about something? I see a lot of arsenic.
Yep.
Toxicity. Tell me a bit about arsenic.
Yep. Arsenic's an interesting one, and again, on trend at the moment, just because of the whole rice. I feel like we do go through these trends where this was a hot topic, 4 to 5 years ago, and it's coming back again. Arsenic's an interesting one because it's everywhere in the environment. It's the basis of things like glyphosate. So it's everywhere in our environment. I actually went down the rabbit hole quite recently because of my partner's elevated arsenic levels, and new research is not just pointing towards things like rice and sushi and eating out, and not just from our food, but more so from our environment. So treated wood. So when you start thinking about where kids play, treated wood is actually treated with arsenic. Start thinking about playgrounds, school equipment, wood chips that are in playground. Yeah. So,
whenever I see a truck go past now full up with the green wood, which is coated with arsenic, I just want to stop the driver and take a hair sample.
Yes. Yes.
And also the thing is, kids lick these things.
Yes.
So adults, well, we're bigger, so we're less susceptible, but we're also not licking things and handling things and putting it in our mouth, which is the same then with lead, which is, I think the thing with arsenic is that there's kind of a low level of knowledge generally about arsenic toxicity.
Yeah.
Lead is much more well known. Like if you look in PubMed about lead and ADHD, like it's absolutely everywhere.
Yep.
Not that any pediatrician is generally testing the children for lead.
Yep.
But so how would kids come in contact with lead?
So up until, don't quote me, but say 20 years ago, we still had lead in our petrol. So it's unfortunately in our soil. Yeah. So not so much about paint, although I have had one case of lead toxicity in a child who was, mum and dad had converted a old wooden door into a mud kitchen.
Oh.
Yeah. And so they were in there playing, eating mud pies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elevated. Yeah. And it was lead paint. Yeah. That was on the door.
And I think the problem is that people get pregnant, they're living in a 2-bedroom house, they go, oh my God, we need to extend. So they knock down walls, they make a little pet project while they're waiting for baby, and they do all the renovations where they're liberating all that 50-year-old paint, which was, I don't know, it was very high in lead to make it a certain color. And then that goes straight into the placenta and straight into the baby. So don't do renovations whenever you're pregnant. Or I even remember, it's not the same, but I remember when my baby was about 3 months old, deciding to paint the house and moving her from room to room while I painted, like crazy things that I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but until you understand all the risks, you just do these things. I've also seen some very, very serious high mercury levels and serious symptoms of high mercury, which are things like slurred speech, leg pain, inability to walk properly, all these sorts of things. Do you see much mercury?
I wouldn't say much mercury, but it's definitely there. And it's usually there again with those children who have low zinc. So heavy metals have like a love-hate relationship with a lot of key nutrients where, say, 1 molecule of mercury blocks 1,000 zinc ions.
Wow.
Yeah. So when when kids present to the clinic and they've got signs and symptoms of a zinc deficiency, low immune system, poor hydrochloric acid, behavioral issues, zinc's number 1 ingredient required for serotonin and dopamine in the brain. So, this is where doing a hair analysis, we get these answers. Yeah. Why are these key nutrients low? And it's usually some form of toxicity.
I don't see mercury as much as I would see high arsenic, but when I do see mercury, the symptoms are very, very dramatic and very, very like exactly what you expect to see with mercury. And there was one older man that I used to see, and he came to me because he had pain all over his body that nobody could fix. And we did mercury testing, and his mercury was through the roof. And I was like, oh, where could that have come from? And he told me that when he was a child, they used to play with mercury.
Oh.
So they used to, I don't know where they got it from, but because maybe I used to have mercury, like I have played with mercury, I think, in the past, but he used to do it all the time, like balls of mercury, like rolling them around. So his whole life, which had been a very traumatic life with lots of serious issues. And then he had through the roof mercury. So if he had done a hair tissue mineral analysis when he was 10, his life trajectory would have been very, very different.
Very different.
So what other sort of interesting cases or interesting things do you see on HTMA? Nutrient deficiencies, like across the board, like generalized, just nutrient deficiencies?
So deficiencies and obviously excess. We can see adrenal function, thyroid function, liver function. Like I said, there's some key insights into digestive issues from a hair analysis, sleep issues from an imbalance of calcium and magnesium, electrolyte imbalances. Electrolytes are our electrical conductors of our body. So sometimes when there's misfiring, so information misfiring or inattentiveness, it can actually be an imbalance between our electrolytes. And from my experience, sweaty little boys, which is predominantly what I see, they usually do have these low electrolytes, which are calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. So they need that constant, replenishing of those electrolytes to help boost that.
Yeah, and then it makes you think, well, why are they so sweaty? Hopefully it's just because they're running around a lot, but often it's because they've got sleep apnea, so they're sweating the whole night long, in which case you need to come and see us about their tonsils and adenoids, because that can be contributing to that. You talk about adrenal issues. The thing that I actually love as well about HTMAs is that you can see when the kids, for instance, the kids with ADHD, they're so super stressed all the time because they're being redirected like 100 times every day. And you can just see their adrenal function is just tanked. And so, that's, you might have to deal with the lead as well as contributing to the ADHD, but you also just need to support their adrenals too, so they can be the best version of themselves. So if you had a magic wand that you could wave for children's health, what would you ask for?
I'd probably take a step back and look at preconception care.
Mm.
So a lot of the time what I see, these things can be prevented from doing some good preconception care with mum and dad, obviously before they plan on having children. So, removing the toxic elements from mum and dad and really replenishing those key nutrients that are required to make healthy babies.
So how far in advance would you love parents to actually do this?
Like a good 9 to 12 months, I would say. Yeah, before they were ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that seems like such a long time when you decide you want to have a baby. But whenever you go through, infertility, miscarriages, you can easily, 2 years can pass without a problem. So I certainly wish I had done some preconception care, but again, it was not on my radar at that time.
And the other thing is, it's not all doom and gloom, And I say this often to parents whose children's hair analysis comes back with a lot of toxic elements or really high heavy metals. We need to be grateful that we've got access to these incredible non-invasive tests. We can't change what has happened. We don't need to get caught up on where these things have come from. And what we do focus on is, like I said, giving children's bodies what they need to be able to get rid of these toxic elements. And that's where we see the results. And with kids, it does happen quite quickly.
Yeah.
They are little. They haven't, they haven't been here for long. They don't have the chronicity that we do as adults. So they can bounce back really quickly.
And they also haven't identified as, the child with the learning difficulty or the problem child. They haven't, made those connections in their brain, because once your child's in high school and they consider themselves to be a problem at school, very, very hard to come back from that.
Yes. Yep.
I'll never forget one boy who came to see me when he was 18 and he'd been expelled from schools and, had a very, very difficult trot since he was about 11. And he had really, really high aluminium. And he came to see me because now he was depressed and was always sick. And he had really high aluminium. And we spent 6 months working on it, and he was a new person. And the only sad thing about that was that he couldn't access that hair test 10 years earlier. And his schooling would have been very different. Just before we finish, anything else that you would like to share, Amy? It's been wonderful. I always learn something from you.
I don't think so. I think that's everything.
Well, thank you so much for having a chat with us today. So Amy works here at the Paediatric Naturopath as a nutritionist and a naturopath. So if you would like to work through these issues with your child, please jump onto our website, www.paediatricnaturopath.com.au, and book an appointment with Amy. Thanks for tuning in to Holistic Health for Happy Kids. I hope you found today's episode helpful and inspiring on your journey to raise thriving, healthy little ones. Remember, small, consistent changes can lead to big transformations. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at the Paediatric Naturopath for more tips, tools, and inspiration. If you've got a question or a topic you'd love to hear about, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and keep supporting your kids in the most natural, nurturing ways possible.